So I am Pat Riley, the moderator for this evening, and we have with us candidates Michael Dolan and Timothy Fitzgibbons. We hope that Jason Hammond will be able to join us later, but we are going to go forward. So thank you both for joining us, and we're going to ask questions and go back and forth. We'll alternate with who has the chance to answer first, so we don't put someone on the spot the first time every time, and it should go well. So thank you both for joining us. The election is April 24th, and it is so important, and hopefully all of our voters in Bridgewater and Raynham turn out, because obviously you are elected district-wide, so it's really important. There are 2 seats at stake on the for Raynham seats and 2 Bridgewater seats, and of course everybody serves the full district. So the first question, and by the luck of the draw, we start with Michael Dolan, is Michael, please take a few minutes to introduce yourself to those who may not know you and explain why you are seeking election, or in your case, re-election to the Bridgewater-Raynham School Committee.
Sure. Thanks, Pat. I appreciate the time and appreciate you extending the offer for us to be here tonight. So I'm Mike Dolan. I've lived in the town of Bridgewater for 11 years. I moved in at that time with my wife and 2 babies. They're not babies anymore. It's funny how that happens. And we've been actively involved in the school district since really 2015, when our son was then in kindergarten and the roof collapsed at the Mitchell. That sort of was the driving force behind me getting involved, and really the both of us getting involved at that point. So we've been proud to serve the community. As I said, I have two children. One is 12, one is 11, and they both attend the BR schools, and they are thrilled with their education. We're thrilled with their education as parents. We know we have really hardworking, dedicated teachers and professionals in our buildings. So in turn, I'm proud to serve those folks as a member of the school committee.
Okay, thank you, Michael Dolan. Same question to Timothy Fitzgibbons,
a former
member of the school committee.
You can call me Tim.
Former member of the school committee who is now seeking election. Tim.
Yes, thank you, Pat. I appreciate you making the time to do this, and I appreciate Raynham Cable for giving us the forum to come down and talk to the folks in Raynham about our candidacy, because I've knocked on a lot of doors in Raynham, and a lot of folks don't understand in Raynham that they get to vote for both a Bridgewater and a Raynham candidate, or 2 in this case, as you said. And I'm sure as a Raynham candidate, because you served on the school committee, you found that people in Bridgewater didn't know that they could vote for a Raynham candidate. So it's important to have these discussions and be able to talk about things. To talk about myself, my parents moved here to Bridgewater in 1969. My father was a professor at Bridgewater State College, then became Bridgewater State University. And they just recently left the town in 2017, I believe, to retire full-time to Florida, which one day I think we all hope to do. I've been involved in the town and doing things with the town for over 30 years. I helped my dad coach Little League when my brothers were playing. I coached in the Babe Ruth League, and I'm sure you remember Warren Kelson, who started the Babe Ruth League in Bridgewater and was a wonderful principal at the Williams School. And I worked with him quite a bit on that baseball stuff. I've been on the advisory committee in Bridgewater, which serves, I believe, a similar role to the Raynham Finance Committee at the time. We advised on town meeting articles, all the articles on town meeting, not just money articles. Our town's change to the charter changed all of that around a little bit, and now we have a town council. As you mentioned, I did serve on the school committee. I was very privileged to get appointed to serve the unexpired term for Mr. Wyman from Bridgewater, and got elected twice to 2 full terms. During my terms, I was chairman when we passed the vote to build the new high school that we have. We also passed a bunch of other building projects in Bridgewater at the time, totaling $100 million in total cost of building projects. So after that, I took a little break from town service, still coached baseball because that was one of my first loves. I've got a Red Sox mask here today. And so I met my wife at that point in time, and I married her, and we have two children. My oldest went through BR till the 8th grade, and is now pursuing a technical career at BP because that's where his passion is. My youngest is in the 5th grade and doing great at Williams, and I can't say enough good stuff about the staff at the Williams School for how they help him out every day. I got back into the town in Bridgewater because an old friend was getting off the assessor's board and asked me to fill in for him. And I just got married at the time, and I tried to put him off, but he wouldn't accept no for an answer. So I said, "All right, Jack, I'll step in," and I got elected to fill a full term there. And then we changed forms of government in Bridgewater, and I've been on the Bridgewater Town Council for the last 10 years. And I've worked very closely with Mr. Dolan, with yourself, obviously, when you were on the school committee. And so I just look at this as, why am I seeking election? I want to continue my public service to the towns of Bridgewater and Raynham. As a Legion baseball coach, I coached high school players and even college kids from both towns, and we still have great relationships to this day. And I think that I can bring a skill set that perhaps hasn't been fully developed in the school district around knowing municipal finance. I've done it for a long time now, and I just want to make sure that we're using our money as wisely as possible to do everything in the best interests of the children of the district that we have, and that would be my number one major motivation.
Okay, thank you, Tim. Next question, and you get this first, Tim. What do you see as the role and the responsibilities of a school committee member? And who do you feel you represent as an elected member of the committee? Who would you be representing?
Well, the roles and responsibilities are pretty clear in the law. We set policy, we set the budget, we supervise the superintendent. Those are the roles and responsibilities, and each of them is very, very important. We set policy. What does that mean? That means this is how the children come into our district every day, interact with staff. This is how staff interacts with children. We set the budget. If we don't set the budget properly, if we don't make sure that every dollar is going to the best interests of the children of the district, then we're being negligent of our duties to do that. And we supervise the superintendent. The superintendent is the face of the district. He's the chief executive officer of the district. Much like our town manager in the town of Bridgewater is the chief executive officer of the town council supervises him, and he runs everything day to day. And so I'm used to that model of running things. And so those are the key roles and responsibilities. As far as who do I represent, first of all, if I don't represent the 5,000 children. I don't know how many children we have in the district now. There's a lot. We've got, if I don't represent them first, then I'm not doing my job. Secondly, we represent all of the people who live in the towns of Bridgewater and Raynham, because they need a good school system. They need a school system to be as good as it can be, because you know what? That improves property values. that makes our towns more attractive to live in. And so I look at it as, first of all, we've got to represent what the children need. Second of all, we've got to represent what the folks in town need, what the towns need, because it helps everyone.
Okay, thank you. Tim, same question, Michael. What do you see as the role and responsibilities of the school committee, and who do you feel you are representing as a member?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. Can't really argue with what Mr. Fitzgibbons laid out. That is what the law states. I would just elaborate just a little bit that it's our responsibility when we set our budget and our policies to really make sure that we're doing that in the best interest of the students, and we are creating a platform that all else is built upon within the district. The student success model that Mr. Swetson has put together is really based on the policies that we have in place and the budget that we set on a yearly basis. So really that's what we do, I think, is the foundation of what all else is built upon. And as far as who we represent, first and foremost, the motivation, I was on with Mr. DuPont a few weeks ago on the radio, and somebody called in and called the students the motivator. And I thought that was a perfect analogy and a perfect title for the kids, because they really are. They have to be our motivation. They've got to be why we do what we're doing all the time, every time. They are our first priority, should be, and always will be our first priority. They're the ones who really can't speak for themselves. They don't have a vote. They don't have the opportunity to vote for us. So we have to speak for them. And then obviously the taxpayers of both communities and the voters.
Thank you, Michael. I do want to mention, too, thanks, as you mentioned, Tim, to the Raynham Channel for allowing us to do this. Also, we want to thank our health agent, Matt Tanis, for providing the plexiglass, so just like the presidential debate, we can do this without masks on.
We didn't even shake hands when we came in.
Oh. We have to follow all the protocols.
Yeah.
Next question to you, Michael, first, is what do you think the working relationship should be between and among school committee members and between the school committee and the administration?
Yeah, that's a really good question. And school committee members, it needs to be collaborative. I don't expect, and the 8 of us now don't expect to agree on everything, and we don't. And that's okay. We have a mutual level of respect for the positions we hold, that we know that the person across from us that may disagree with us is doing what they feel is in the best interest of the kids. So I think that that's the biggest piece, is collaborative, and always having that open line of communication with the superintendent, as well as the team that he has assembled around him. Mr. Powers, all of the principals, the assistant principals. So that's really indicative of setting up a strong back and forth between the administration and the school committee. As far as really day-to-day communications with the administration, that really has to be set up through the superintendent. We can't circumvent the superintendent, as Mr. Fitzgibbons has mentioned. The superintendent is the CEO of the district. You would never circumvent a CEO if you were going to complain about something or compliment someone. You would go through the superintendent to do that. And then within those conversations, pull in admin as needed. I think that's one thing that we do really well as a school committee right now. We bring in the experts. There are 8 of us, 3 former teachers, a medical doctor, Mr. Morera is in the emergency management field. I'm in the risk management field. So there is a lot of knowledge around the table, but it's always good to bring in the experts who are living it every day. So,
Thank you, Michael. Same question, Tim.
Yes, thank you for that. I agree with a lot of what Mr. Dolan said. The working relationship between school committee members should be always collegial. I have always thanked members of my committees, whether we agreed or not, after, during a meeting. But as we closed the meeting, before we adjourned, I thanked them for their input and what they did and what they gave. I've always approached service to the district, to the community, as everyone, as Mr. Dolan said, is trying to do the right thing as they see it. I don't believe that should ever change, because nobody's going to give up all the time that a school committee member does to do the wrong thing. That's just my personal belief. So between school committee members, we can obviously disagree, but at the end of the day, if there's a 5-3 vote one way and Mr. Dolan's on one side and I'm on the other, I'm going to say, thank you, Mr. Dolan. You did a great job presenting your case. I hope he'd do the same to me. And we'd move on to the next issue where we might be on the same side, because that's the way town government should work. And obviously, I shouldn't say obviously, because maybe it's not. But we do have to deal with the open meeting law. We can't reach out to other school committee members and deliberate behind the scenes and say, oh, well, let's vote this way on this. That's the Attorney General and the Plymouth County and the Bristol County District Attorneys take a very dim view on that. So we can't do that, and I wouldn't even suggest that. Because some people say, well, why didn't you figure this out beforehand? Well, because we can't is the short answer usually. As far as the relationship between committee members and the administration, or the school committee and the administration, one of the things that I've found over the years of my service to the towns is some people have a hard time understanding that they are part of a board, but they're not the person's boss who the board supervises. The board supervises the superintendent. The board supervises the town manager. The Board of Selectmen supervises the Raynham Town Administrator. The Board of Assessors supervises the town assessor. But that doesn't mean I can call up anyone who I served, that I was on a board of, call them up and say, do this. No, the only way that you can affect do this is to have a vote of a majority of the board to say, the board would like you to do this, so please do it. And should we have an open communication with the superintendent? Absolutely. But, a lot of folks at home, I believe, think that, if they send me or Mr. Dolan or Mr. Hammond or whoever an email and say, I want this done. Well, thank you for emailing me. I certainly appreciate you bringing up the issue. I can certainly raise it with the superintendent, but I would be only one of 8 people. And there might be 7 other people who think this is not a big issue. And there's no way, there's no, and there shouldn't be any way for one person on any committee to direct the employee of the entire committee to do it. So it's just, it's kind of a tough thing for folks to realize, but it's a very important thing for people to realize.
Yes, thank you, Tim. Next question, what do you consider to be the top 3 issues facing the district at this time?
I have 3.
Okay.
We need to face fiscal reality. We need to understand where we're getting our money from and how much we can expect to increase every year, whether it be the state or the 2 towns or other sources of revenue. So we need to understand that. We need to plan multiple years into the future to understand what does our revenue situation look like? What does our expense situation look like? And make sure they're in balance. And if they're not, try to figure out a way to address it sooner rather than later so it doesn't become a crisis. Second most important issue facing us is a demographic reality. In the last 10 to 15 years, we've gone from 90% white Caucasian to 80% white Caucasian in the district. That's a doubling of the non-white Caucasian population in the district. We have to make sure all of our programs, all of our teaching methods, et cetera, all of our in-service training is making sure that we're being inclusive of everyone in the district to make everyone feel welcome and a part of the learning environment of the district. And the third, which is something that every municipality is struggling with these days, is communication reality. Because no matter how many times it gets said in different venues, there are always people who say, I didn't hear it. How do we get better at making sure everybody hears the same message in the way they want to hear it, whether it be on Facebook or Twitter or Instagram or through an email? Long gone are the days where I brought home a notice from the superintendent in my backpack and my mom pulled it out and read it with my dad and said, okay, this is what's going on. That's just not the way information is consumed these days. So we have to try to come up with a way to address that communication reality so that everybody, not just the parents in the district, but everybody outside of being parents knows what's going on and understands, okay, this is what's happening and this is why it's happening. And that's a big challenge, but I think we're up for it.
Thank you, Tim. Same question, Michael. What do you consider to be the top three issues facing the district at this time?
Sure. COVID is obviously the first. In my opinion, has changed the way we're doing business. Frankly, we are now in a. People say that our kids are behind because of COVID. And we do. We have makeup work that we have to do. So how we remain agile and responsive to COVID, but in bigger picture, how we continue to be responsive to the educational needs of our students based on what they've gone through COVID. I think to Mr. Fitzgibbon's point about diversity of curriculum, is one of those other pieces that we have to look at, and we've started to. I know Ms. Richards has started to look closely at our social studies curriculum and making sure that it is not spun one way versus another, that it actually gives a full 360 view. So that continues to be a priority for the district, and one of those ways that we can support that work is through our budgetary process. And then finally, I'd say, do our physical spaces still serve the purpose that they were meant to? You look at Raynham, you look at the La Liberty School and the Merrill schools, both were top-notch buildings when they were built. The La Liberty was a junior high for a while. Is that building still meeting the need of its current population? So I think we have to look at that globally on both sides of the district. Bridgewater, we're fortunate to be building a new elementary school. Unfortunate circumstances that got us there, but fortunately the voters of Bridgewater have said, yes, we need a new one. So it's really looking at those physical spaces to make sure that they're meeting the educational requirements.
Thank you, Mike. And you get the next question
Sure.
first. If you are reelected, what will your priorities be, and what specifically will you hope to accomplish over the next 3 years?
Sure. Again, one of the biggest priorities is making sure our buildings are meeting our needs. That would be one of the largest priorities. And making sure that we budget, to Mr. Fitzgibbon's point, that we budget appropriately. not just for our collective bargaining contracts, but for the future as well. Are we putting money aside to do projects in the coming years? We're looking at redoing the turf field at the high school for the first time in 10 years. And we've got to start putting a better rainy day fund in place. So we do have work to do there. So that is a priority, obviously, as well, that we can maintain our facilities, like I said, and plan for further work that needs to be done on them. And the sort of the biggest priority that I want to, or accomplishment, I should say, to get done, and you and I are working on it now, is the regional agreement. It's not going to be done by the 24th of April, and that's okay. But if reelected, we'll continue to make that a priority to make sure we get that done. The last time it was updated, as you know, was 11 years ago. So our hope is that it'll be on a 5-year cycle now to make sure that we're doing things right.
Thank you, Michael. Tim, same question. If you are elected, what will your priorities be, and what specifically would you hope to accomplish in the next 3 years?
Yeah, so I just want to piggyback on what Mr. Dutton said, and I'm not stealing what you said, Mike. I'm just agreeing with you, but I'm going to say it in a little bit different way. Clearly, as I said, my number one issue for why I'm running is to make sure that the district is using its funds in the best way possible for the children of the district, to make sure that we're providing them the best education we possibly can as a district. And we need to do that looking forward as well. And Mr. Dolan brought up around building reserve funds, which is actually now permissible a bit under the Municipal Modernization Act that was passed recently under Governor Baker. Before then, there was just the E&D, the Excess and Deficiency Fund, that could be used, and unfortunately, that just became a revolving fund, or has become a revolving fund of, let's save as much money this year, let's put a spending freeze on as soon as the year begins, so that we're able to save enough money to fund what we need next year, and it just kind of perpetuates itself. That's not the greatest way to run the financial management of the district. I understand why it was done that way, and I'm not criticizing. I'm just saying, let's try to get to some more best practices around that. And then as far as facilities go, absolutely, we need to look at, and like Mr. Dolan, I was on with Mr. Dupont on his radio program, although I never got anyone to call in, so you were doing better than me there, Mike. I had to talk the whole hour with him, and Jim took up most of the time, as he always does. But one of the things we talked about was how spaces affect curriculum. And I was lucky enough to serve on the Mitchell Building Committee with Mr. Dolan for a while, until we got to the right program and we got to the right number on what it was going to cost. And then I knew my effectiveness would be limited after that, so I wanted to step out, especially also because they had much better people on figuring out, should we grade the road this way, should we come in that way or the other way. But I did serve with them on that committee, and it was quite enlightening to hear from the administration and to hear from our outside experts around how educational spaces are created today in best practice way, and Mitchell's going to be that for the youngest students on the Bridgewater side in the district. So everyone's got to get up to the regional high school eventually. So let's make sure that our students in Raynham are also having those same experiences in those same kind of spaces, if we can, to make sure that we're being as, for lack of a better term, fair as possible to do that. And then the third priority for me is, again, I just go back to communication and just say, we've got to make sure that the entire community, not just parents, but the entire community has a way to access information from the school and understands it. And, it's going to be a big lift to do that, because a lot of people don't want the information until they find out they don't have the information. Then they complain they don't have the information. I don't know if you've ever experienced that, Pat, but I have. But we need to be able to put it out there. And I just want to give one more bit of kudos to Mr. Dolan, because he I believe, Mike, you were the chair of the communications subcommittee on the Mitchell.
Yes.
And they created a great website, which is
BridgewaterBuildingProject.com.
Thank you. and it just answers every question, and the town manager at every meeting in Bridgewater has a Mitchell School update. And every meeting he says, if you have any questions, go to this website and it will fill you in on everything you need. And and they had great public participation meetings and listening meetings. And those are the things we need to do to communicate with the larger community, so that not just our parents, but our entire communities are behind the schools and trying to do the right thing for the kids in our district and trying to do the right thing for our towns. Because ultimately, if you do the right thing for our schools, you're doing the right thing for our towns.
Thank you, Tim. Next question. Even before COVID became an issue, social, emotional issues were a huge concern, and obviously COVID has only magnified those concerns. How does the district balance the social, emotional needs of its students while also addressing their educational needs by providing them with the best educational program possible?
Okay.
It's a mouthful. Yeah, that's you.
Darn, I was hoping it was Mr. Dolan, because I need a second to think about this one. That's actually, and it's a great question, Pat, because it's very important. It's actually very important to me as a parent, because I have a fifth grader who certainly has experienced a lot of upset in the last year due to COVID, in addition to his nature as the kind of kid he is. But it also goes back to a question you asked earlier about what's the school committee's role. The school committee's role is to set policy, and it goes back to what Mr. Dolan said. We look to the experts on that for policy. So I am in no way a mental health expert. I am no way a social, emotional, etc. expert. So everything I'm about to say is just my ideas as a dad. And I just want to put that out there, because I'd certainly look to the experts that we have on staff. But my son, when we decided that he could go back and go back full time, because he qualified to go back 4.5 days a week, he looked at his mother and he said, well, I guess when I die of COVID, you can bury me in the backyard next to the cat. So how does the school address that? How does the school address that? We talked with his principal, we talked with his teachers, we talked with his guidance counselor, and they've done a great job transitioning him back into, feeling comfortable at school, feeling like he's safe, etc. He sees behavior issues in school, and they have to move him out of his classroom to address the behavior of a particular student or a couple particular students. I don't know the exact details. I wouldn't even give them to you if I knew. And he gets anxious about that. Why do I have to move when I'm trying to learn? And so, yes, COVID has certainly heightened all of that anxiety among children, and I see it. And so I would definitely be looking to our professionals to look and say, how do we meet kids where they are today, with what they're bringing in to the school system in their heads, to be able say, okay, here's how we can help them, and it's it's a almost a thankless job because there's so many kids who have so many needs, and there's only so many teachers and administrators and guidance counselors, et cetera, who can help deal with those needs. And I just thank all of them for all the efforts they're making, because I know a lot of kids are in the same boat.
Thank you, Tim. Mike, same question.
Sure. Thanks, Pat. So it really has to be a holistic approach when we talk about educating our kids. It can't just be what's in textbook. We've really got to make sure that we're educating them beyond the textbook. We've got to educate them for life. And part of that is making sure that we've got the professionals in place, our social emotional support systems of our school adjustment counselors, our school psychologists. Every school has one or more than one of those individuals. And I know that they do many check-ins on many students. Because again, it's not just those folks, it's classroom teachers. It's the teacher who sees that something's off in their classroom that day. Well, maybe take a few minutes and say, let's put the textbooks aside and let's talk about what's going on. I know my kids had an experience in their class recently that the teacher stopped teaching for a bit, and they had a very open and honest conversation about how people were feeling in the class. There was some anxiety still coming back full person in the building. So the teacher took the time and really did a pulse check with the students. And it's those types of things that are invaluable. Yes, the textbook knowledge is important, but we also have to make sure that we're preparing these kids to really make it through life. And that's what it comes down to.
Okay.
Can I just quickly follow up on that, Pat? And I know Mr. Dolan said it a certain way, and I know he didn't mean it that way, so he'll join me in my statement, I'm sure, is the teacher didn't stop teaching. The teacher kept teaching in a different way.
Correct.
And that's what makes our teachers in the Bridgewater-Raynham district so great.
Yes.
They're able to do that.
Agreed.
Thank you. Mike, next question. How would you assess the educational program offered by our school district, and what do you see as its strengths, and what areas would you like to improve or expand upon?
Yeah, that is a loaded question, Pat. It really, truly is.
I didn't say they'd be easy.
you did not. I'll give you that. People will look to our DESE scorecard or our how we do on standardized testing. I don't put a lot of stock in standardized testing. We can't teach to a test. Again, we've got to make sure we're teaching our kids to be lifelong learners and members of the community at large, and contributing members of the community at large. It's a difficult question because it's not really a cut and dry response. I can't say that one area needs to improve. I would never say our English departments need to improve because our reading scores need to go up. That's not. I would never make that leap. I really do think, to go back to the holistic piece, I think that has to be our priority. We've got to make sure that we're doing that, and to me, that's how we evaluate how we're doing as a district. Are we graduating seniors in 12th grade that are active participants within their communities? Were they active participants within their education? Not necessarily where they're going after high school. Are they going to college? Are they going into the military? Those types of things aren't necessarily important, just as the standardized test isn't important. It's more of, have we graduated that student to where they are an adult who can articulate why it's important to have an education, why it's important to constantly be a lifelong learner.
Thank you, Michael. Tim, same question. How would you assess the educational program Bridgewater Raynham offers, and what do you see as its strengths and any areas that you'd like to expand or improve upon?
I'm going to agree with Mike again on this. It's kind of a loaded question, but I'll go for it anyway. Okay. I think we're doing well, but I also believe we can always do better. If you don't believe you can do better as a person, as an organization, as whatever, why are you waking up in the morning every day? You can always do better. So, this is an area where I would look to our experts in curriculum, in student learning, and say, what are the key areas you think we should focus on, and why do you think that? And probe with questions about that to understand, okay, you think we need to be here. Why do we need to be there? Is there another area that you decided wasn't important? Why did you decide that wasn't as important as the one you're highlighting? So as a school committee, we're kind of setting the policy, and it's the superintendent's job to execute on that and create the best school district he can with the resources he has or she has. And so, I'd say that. As far as strengths and areas to improve upon, I think one of the most important things we can improve upon is meeting every child where they are. And it's very difficult given levels of classroom size, et cetera, that we know we all face. But I go back to my friend George Mitchell, who, if you know any of his kids, his Mitchell Monsters, they loved him. And he knew computers before anyone knew computers. He had computers set up in his classroom at the McElwain School in Bridgewater, and he had all his different kids in the classroom on different programs doing things that were helping them. And, that's amazing. And so, to be able to continue to do that and make sure that we're addressing every child where they are, I think is an important thing. There are some kids, those who are going to graduate in the top 10 of the class, who are just super motivated by themselves, and they're going to do fine for the most part. They don't need to be pushed, prodded, etc. But there's a whole bunch in the middle who we need to make sure they're getting the most out of their educational experience that they can, and they're not just kind of sliding by because they can, because they're one of 30 in a classroom. So how do we do that? That's a really big question. But to me, it's important that we challenge every student, as Mr. Dolan said, to become a lifelong learner, to be able to be the best they can be coming out of the Bridgewater Raynham School District, and be able to make the choices in their life that they want to make with the ammunition that we've given them.
Thank you, Tim. As you both alluded to, budgetary process is a main part of the school committee's role, and I think you'll agree the most difficult part of being on the school committee is when you don't have enough money to fund the budget. If you're faced with that you have to make cuts, what are your priorities? Tim.
Well, and this is kind of a pet peeve with me, so I'll apologize in advance. There are cuts and there are cuts. If I give you $10 this week and I give you $10 next week for an allowance, I didn't cut your allowance. If I give you $10 this week and 2 years from now I give you $10 for the same allowance, maybe you can make an argument that inflation has kind of come up and I'd want $10.50 because that's the same purchasing power as I had for $10. If I give you $10 this week and you tell me, Dad, I need $20 next week for my allowance, and I give you $10, I didn't cut you $10, I gave you the same dollars. So when we talk about cuts, we have to be careful about what we're talking about. And I don't even like that word, because actually when it comes down to what budgets need to be, we need to make sure that every dollar is spent in the most appropriate way possible. And everyone, unless, you're, I don't know, I won't even mention any names in Raynham. I can think of a lot of rich people in Raynham, though. Everyone lives on a budget, and they can't spend more than they can spend. And so we have to realize that as a district. We have to make sure that we're not spending more than we can spend. We're not planning to spend more than we're going to have. And because that's where we get into problems. When I get onto the town council in Bridgewater, we had a $600,000 to $700,000 free cash deficit. We've been able to turn that around through sound fiscal management and are creating reserve funds. The town manager has made a commitment to the school district, town manager or the finance director, I'm not sure, that for the foreseeable future, the district can count on $400,000 of capital funds every year in the budget process for capital projects coming from the town of Bridgewater. So we're able to do that through sound fiscal management. That starts with contracts, that starts with making sure that we've got all of our expenses under control, that we're going out to bid, getting the best prices for everything, etc. And then when it comes down to it, if we just need to set up a budget that says, here are the things that are really important to us, because that's really what budgeting is, saying what's important to us, what do we want to spend our money on. A lot of people think going out to dinner every Friday night is very important. A lot of people think putting that $100 that you'd have gone out to dinner on Friday night with into your kid's college fund is very important. Neither one's making the wrong choice. They're making the choice for themselves. And so, we just have to make sure we as a school committee, as a district, are making the best choice possible for the district. We're always going to have limited funds. We can't ever say, wave a magic wand and give us all the money that would make everything perfect. I'd love to do that, but we can't.
Okay, thank you, Tim. Mike, same question.
Yeah, this year we have had the smoothest budgetary process we've had in my 6 years on the committee. The towns have been phenomenal this year. This was a challenging year, not just for the district, but for the towns financially. We know that. So on behalf of the entire school committee, thank you to both towns, both bodies that serve the towns as well. But specifically, what the priorities I would earmark are direct student services. Anything that impacts our students directly would be the priority. After that, all things are on the table for cutting, if you would. I think it's important to recognize our finance department as a district, specifically Ms. Macedo. She does incredible work, and she works really well with the finance folks in both towns. And I think that relationship has gotten stronger over the years, which really has helped us as a district, and I think it's helped the towns as well to understand what our priorities are and what we plan on asking for. Budgets aren't easy, especially in a regional district. We have 3 bites at the apples. We say we have local aid, we have state aid, and then aid that comes in from the communities, and that is where our money comes from. We can't go out back, just like nobody can go out back and pull money off a tree as much as we want to and love to. it just can't be done. So we do live within the means that we have, and will continue to plan as we always have.
Thank you, Mike. Next question, what do you see as the role of social media? And how do you, as a school committee member, address any misinformation that might be circulated? Do you think the administration should be tasked with addressing any such misinformation? That's another loaded question.
Well, it's not really a loaded question. As Tim knows, I said this at a Meet the Candidates night a week or two ago, that I think, frankly, that Facebook has killed the art of conversation. I really do. I believe that people say things to other people on Facebook that they would never dream about saying to another person's face or in a crowd of people. So to me, I struggle with social media. It's unfortunately given a platform to folks who don't have the best of intentions for whatever reason that they have. As far as the administration sort of responding to misinformation, that would be a full-time job. It really would. And I'm not disparaging folks who use social media in any way, shape, or form, but it really would be. And we don't have the manpower or woman power to do that. We would need somebody to constantly look at every platform out there, and that's not what we can't make that a priority. Because if we make that a priority, then we're losing the priority of the kids and keeping the kids centered. So again, I know that's not a popular opinion of social media, but that's the opinion I hold.
Thank you, Michael. Tim, do you want to have a stab at that one?
Sure. I'll take any question you give me, Pat. First of all, how do I, as a school committee member, or how would I, as a school committee member, respond to misinformation on social media? It depends. Because as a school committee member, I have to be very cognizant that I'm one of 8. And whatever I say, the 7 other people on the committee might be like, "You're an idiot, why did you say that?" And I can't speak for the school committee by myself. It's just impossible to do. And there's all sorts of open meeting law issues, et cetera, that you have to deal with around that. So, if it were a friend of mine who was saying something that I thought was a little bit wrong, might I pick up the phone and call them and just say, "Hey, not for publication, but we've known each other a long time. What you put up is kind of silly, and here's the real story behind it. So if you take it down, I appreciate it. If you want to maintain that opinion, I respect your right to do it, but I'm not going to engage with you in that forum because it's not appropriate." And so, it depends. If I don't know the person, I would rather them send me an email to my school committee account so that it's documented appropriately. It can be forwarded on to the appropriate people, and whatever happens. But it goes back to that third pillar of why I want to run, which is communication reality. And social media is a communication reality these days. And we can't, as Mr. Dolan says, hire somebody. Why would we hire somebody to do full-time monitoring of social media when we have so much needs that our kids need in school? And nor would I look to the administration to necessarily address misinformation on social media, especially because it may be a policy question instead of an executive session or an administrative question. And there's no kind of room for the executive to talk about what the policy is or should be, unless it's very clear. you know, that's up to the 8 of us sitting around the table saying, okay, this is the policy. And it's very, very difficult for people who live in the I want an answer right now moment to hear that you know, and Mr. Dolan will laugh when I say this, we move at the speed of government. and I've been saying that about the Mitchell School for years. We've been moving at the speed of government. The district literally got in the request to get on the building list as soon as it possibly could, and then it's a whole big game of Mother May I of the state saying, okay, now you can proceed, and then you have to send something else in, and, okay, now you can proceed. And the district has literally done everything as fast as they possibly can to get the Mitchell School back up and running. But everyone wants the answer right now, today, and if they don't get it, then they're really upset. And I'll just address one more thing, if I may, because it's kind of in the same realm, is when you have like public comment at meetings. You know, you can hear a person's story, and it might be in public comment, it might be on social media, that really like tugs at you as a person. You're like, wow, that's really awful, and I feel bad for the person. But we you know, if the board wasn't notified about it, if we can't deliberate on it, we can't talk about it, because everyone else who might be affected by that issue has a right to be notified about. We're going to talk about this. So, you know, it's just this really tough dynamic between I feel for you as a person, but as a member of a committee, I have to act a certain way.
Thank you, Tim. We are, believe it or not, just about out of time. So I'm going to ask you to take about a minute to tell our viewers, what do you think is the most compelling reason why they should give you one of their votes for Bridgewater Raynham School Committee? We start first with you, Tim.
Sure. And I don't think I said this, so I'll say it right now, that Mr. Dolan's on the committee. Mr. Hammond, unfortunately, couldn't be here for other reasons, and we appreciate that, is on the committee. So I am running in hopes of replacing one of them. I am not running against them. I'm running for the position. I'm running because I think I can bring a skill set to the school committee that they don't have, which is a lot of really good municipal finance background and a lot of historical knowledge, so to speak. And so, you know, I just asked the voters of Raynham to give me one of the 2 votes on April 24th, and I'll close with what my friend Marilyn Hunt, the town clerk of Bridgewater, has always told me in certain situations. If you do what you always did, you're going to get what you always got. So if you like what's going on with the district and you're happy with Mr. Dolan and Mr. Hammond, they're both great guys, and that's what your vote should be. If you want something different, then I suggest 1 vote for me, and either of the other 2 gentlemen is great. And in fact, you know, Mr. Dolan came here today, so I give him great kudos for that.
Okay, thank you, Tim Fitzgibbons. Mike Dolan, most compelling reason why voters should give you one of their votes.
Sure, thanks, Pat. I think that I have a true passion for public education, and I think over the past 6 years, I've made that known, and that passion is driven by the desire to see our kids succeed, and by our kids succeeding, our community succeed. And to me, that's important. That's civics 101. It's bigger than just me. It's bigger than just Mr. Fitzgibbons. We have work that needs to continue to happen, and that's our legacy as people who volunteer, yourself included. Our legacy is what we've left behind, and making sure that what we've left behind raises our kids up and raises our communities up.
Thank you, and thank you both very much for coming. Michael Dolan, Tim Fitzgibbons, candidates for the Bridgewater Raynham Regional School Committee. Good luck to both of you. Everyone, please remember to vote Saturday, April 24th. The polls in Raynham are open from 10 a.m. to 8 p.m. and everybody votes at the Raynham Middle School. Please do so, and thank you all for being with us, and good night.